In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read ancient tomes, the order of the Abercast. We are the brave and bold.
Stigmata Studios presents The Jinn Jihad. The Jinn Jihad kicks your face with myths, mysteries, epic battles, suicide bombers, quirky characters, and divine power armor. In this epic graphic novel, the warrior archangels descend on a city in chaos. It's all-out war. The non-standard assembly battles an ancient terrorist organization and their ultimate weapon, a corrected, magically enhanced, unstoppable monster, the Jinn. This graphic novel is a wild ride. It's one part distant Arab myth, one part Old Testament angelic vengeance, and one part unique heroic tough guys. Available on Amazon. Get more info on the Jinn Jihad and other titles at stigmatastudios.com.
And the whole earth was one language and of one speech. And it came to pass as they journeyed from the east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said unto one another, Go to, let us make brick, and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. And they said, Go to, let us build a city and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven. And let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower, which the children of men builded. And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And this they begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down there and confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad, and from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound their language of all the earth. And from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad the face of all the earth.
Little horn is born. Little horn is born. Little horn is born. But its legs for another score.
The Abercast. Occult. History. Conspiracy. Violence.
All right. Well, the cold open was basically the whole episode. So there you go. Everyone have a great week. Just kidding. I'm John. This is the Abercast. Thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate it. We just had a record-setting month of November. Not to throw any numbers out there or whatnot, but broke some personal record for the show, and I thank you guys. Appreciate all that. That's a great way to support the show. Other great way to support the show is to rate and review it on iTunes. It's getting lonely out there. It's like a fucking tumbleweed just rolling through my iTunes section, like begging for a little bit of love. You can also spread the disease. If you're a weirdo that likes to listen to the show and the weird topics we discuss, you might know another weirdo that might also like it. So tell them about it, would you please? The best way to support the show is to purchase some books. Purchase some books. That's the best way because it helps me pay for stuff. And the other two ways are free. They don't cost you anything but a tiny little bit of time. Another thing is, I apologize if I sound a little funny. I'm getting over a cold. But I'm in a great mood. I'm in a tremendous mood. I'm in the best mood. Just popping up some popcorn and watching the left implode. So before we get any further, would also like to say, hey, if you guys have any are musicians or know any musicians that might like to play in the decompression part of the show, which is the last the last portion of the show. I don't know if you guys hang on and wait for the end of the episodes, but always play a little bit of indie music out there. If you guys know of any musicians, or if you are a musician, you like to send me some music to play, I am now open to that. So thank you. You can find me on social media just about everywhere. If you go to stigmatastudios.com, there's a bunch of little links to all my social media places. Also, I don't ever really give this out, but my email address is Towers, TOWERS, as in Sierra, 113 at gmail.com. You can hit me up over there as well. Just put something clever in the subject line so I will pay attention to it. Anyways, tonight, I always like to point out the different past episodes that this episode might link into, as you guys know. So you will want to maybe brush up on episode 63, The Giant of Kandahar. Episode 20, Those Who Weep for Tammuz. And tertiarily, maybe episode 37, which is the Book of Job, God versus the Leviathan. So tonight, we're going to be talking about a subject that, as I think about it more and more, it's kind of close to my heart. And the reason I say that is because when I was in high school, I wrote and drew these comic books that no one will ever see. But in one of those comic books, apparently I was obsessed with this idea even back then, because I had my guys going to find the Tower of Babel. They were actually involved in the Iraq War somehow, and they found the Tower of Babel. So I guess it's always sort of captured my imagination for one reason or another. And as you might know, my latest graphic novel, The Ages, it gets all into the Tower of Babel, but not as a ruin, but as it was like being built and going up. So The Ages also deals with some weird like theories and stuff that we're going to be talking about, and then also it features in this chapter the infamous King Nimrod, which is what tonight is going to be about. So mix up your Jin Jihad, make it as big and tall to reach into the heavens. And because we're going to be talking all about Nimrod and the Tower of Babel. We're going to get into that in... All right, so our story picks up directly after the famed deluge, or the flood of Noah. So God picked one family to sort of survive because their genes had become corrupted. I'm still fascinated by this story when God said that Noah was pure, quote, pure in his generations. This, of course, all has to do with this, all this is, angel fucking that was going on. So, these angels came down and started hooking up with these earth girls. It's the earth girls, man. It's always those earth girls. And they start pumping out these awful kids who fucked everything up. And so God was like, hey, he tried to murder everybody except for this one family because their genes weren't messed up by all this angel fucking. And of course, this one family was to save all the animals too, so let's not forget them. And of course, God failed at murdering everybody, like he always does. We know that God messes everything up. You can refer back to the God versus Leviathan episode when I make a pretty big case about how he fucks everything up, even right at the very beginning. He doesn't tell us this. The Bible doesn't explicitly tell us this explicitly, but it's in there. You know, if he killed all these giants and shit, why are there giants and shit all over the Old Testament after the flood? You know, so like, are these? Did Noah's line beget these? I've done a lot of research this week. Did Noah's line produce these giants like Goliath and Og and all these fucking guys? All the guys that anyhow, I'm not gonna. Okay, so there has been an undeterminate amount of time that has passed, and three things happened. One, Noah's family expands into a large enough group to be mobilized into a large workforce. Some people say like 600,000 of these people. Or two, and what probably happened was there were multiple bands of survivors and they all conglomerated, forming a larger tribe or community. Or three, a combination of the both. I'll split it with you. I'll split the difference with you. All right, so the amount of people, the large group or whatever, is important because it's also a large group of skilled people. They were traveling, according to Scripture, they were traveling east into the land of Shinar. This is Mesopotamia. This is what will be known as Babylon. This is what will be known as Iraq. So if Noah's Ark is on Mount Ararat in Turkey, then these turkeys were more accurately traveling south, or at least southeast. So they decide to build this city and a tower so tall that it could reach heaven, or probably at least tall enough not to be drowned in the case of another flood. So let's take a minute here, because a lot of things, like, you know, like in the Bible stories, you're like, they want to build a tower so tall so they can get to heaven or whatever. It's like some kind of like coloring book version of the story. So let's take a moment and try to see if we can figure out what they were actually trying to do by building this tower. And I'm not really talking about like a early Rob Skiba Stargate kind of fucking thing. Like, I'm talking about, why are they building a tower so tall? Like, I don't even know where the Stargate thing comes into. It doesn't mention any kind of Stargate thing at all. Nowhere that I could find in there. But these guys are out there and they're like, what they're really doing, bro, is they're really building a Stargate so they could go into another dimension. That's not what it says. It says they're building this tall fucking tower. So let's get into it. I posted a picture of like all my show prep and stuff as I was getting ready to press the button, and my buddy Jesse Saxon was like, "That mason jar looks pretty clear." It's because a mason jar full of gin. You know, the gin is it's invisible. All right, so let's. That just happened during the commercial thing. Okay, so what's really going on here about this whole tower thing? In some stories, they're building it to actually war with heaven. There's stories of them standing on the top of the tower, shooting arrows off into the sky, and when the arrows come back, they got blood on them. And you're like, well, why are these people? Why would they want to be in a war with heaven? Well, because heaven's been pretty hostile to mankind lately in the chronology of Genesis. And I'm not talking about like this whole Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve, although we are going to get into them in a little bit. But I'm just talking about like there was this angelic rape invasion that happened. And then that turned into the horrific Nephilim rising. They became tyrants, and they consumed all the resources and warred with men, and probably a horrific Nephilim rape culture, you know. And then there was, you know, God's genocidal deluge. So it's been a couple hellacious couple generations for these people, and they're probably like, hey, let's get up to heaven, war with them, and install our gods, who are way cooler than this fucking crazy ass that's up there. More on their gods maybe in a little bit. We're talking about their god king Nimrod, his wife Seriamis, and their child Tammuz. You'll remember these guys from the women who weep for Tammuz episode, which was way back in the day, dog, way back. But it's important to note, especially for me, because this is also part of my last graphic novel, The Ages. This was not the first city ever, biblically speaking. Back in Genesis 4, Cain went ahead and he had a son, and he named the son Enoch. And then he built a city, and he also named the city Enoch. This was not the Enoch from the Book of Enoch, not the same Enoch that was translated to heaven and turned into the most powerful archangel Metatron by use of a divine sacred power armor. Totally different Enochs, bros. Totally different. All of these Enochs are in my books, though. The graphic novels, by the way, the Djinn Jihad, it's got a lot of Metatron in it. The Ages features Cain and his son Enoch and his city Enoch. And the construction of the city of Enoch, which I used as kind of a foreshadowing or a little midrash, or a little narrative rhyme or dovetail, or a little foreshadowing to the larger Tower of Babel part of the story. So you can see I'm steeped all over this. This is my shit all over the place. Not literally my shit all over the place, but this is the kind of shit that I like all over the place. I feel like I'm digging a hole.
The Non-Standard Squad, 1944.
All right, so back to our Tower of Babel. Who's building this thing that dares to ascend to the heaven? Who is building this thing who rebels against the commandment of God to spread or scatter over the face of the earth? Actually, the guy who was building it, his name is Nimrod. You might be familiar with his name. Like, people think Nimrod's like, because it's like a slang word for like, hey, well, look at this Nimrod over here. That actually stems from a Bugs Bunny insult from like in the 1930s. There's a Bugs Bunny cartoon where Bugs is facing off against Elmer Fudd, who's a hunter, and we'll find out later that Nimrod is known to be a mighty hunter, and so he calls him Nimrod in this cartoon, and it totally changes the vernacular of this concept that in England in the West. So who's Nimrod, do you say? Well, the historian Josephus writes, "Now it was Nimrod who excited them to such an affront and contempt of God. He was the grandson of Ham, the son of Noah, a bold man. And of great strength of hand, he persuaded them not to ascribe it to God, as if it were through his means that they were happy, but to believe that it was their own courage which procured that happiness. He also gradually changed the government into a tyranny, seeing no other way of turning men from the fear of God, but to bring them into a constant dependence on his power. He also said he would be revenged on God if he should have a mind to drown the world again. For this he would build a tower too high for the waters to reach, and that he would avenge himself on God for destroying their forefathers." So there's some interesting correlations here between this and it's not really like a coincidental correlation, but this whole thing about the government turning to tyranny, as it always as it always does, to bring men into his power and bending them to his will. In the book that I'm keep referring to, in this Ages graphic novel, he introduces a monetary / debt / slavery system, where the workers who are firing the bricks and building the tower get 3 shekels a day, and each thing that they need to live costs a shekel, and so they wind up getting in debt with the bank, who's And I had a lot of fun with all the symbols, like the symbol for money being like the serpent wrapped around the tree in the Garden of Eden, or the apple with the eye in it. And there's a lot of like Mithras or Taurus imagery in it. Anyhow, I'm getting this whole thing is not a gigantic commercial for the ages. It just is. I wrote about it extensively and drew about it extensively in the book. But what do I know? I'm just a writer with a podcast. Back to Josephus. Now the multitude were very ready to follow the determination of Nimrod, and to esteem it a piece of cowardice to submit to God, and they built a tower, neither sparing any pains nor being in any degree negligent about the work, and by reason of the multitude of hands employed upon it, it grew very high, sooner than anyone could expect. But the thickness of it was so great, and it was so strongly built, that thereby its great height seemed upon the view to be less than it really was. And it was built of burnt brick, cremated together with mortar made of bitumen, and that it might not libel or admit water. This bitumen stuff is actually what Noah used to seal up the planks on the ark too. He learned a little something from his great-great-granddad. When God saw that they had acted so madly, he did not resolve to destroy them utterly, since they were not grown wiser by the destruction of their former sinners, but he caused a tumult amongst them. They produced by producing in them diverse languages, and causing that through the multitude of those languages they should not be able to understand one another. The place wherein they built the tower is now called Babylon. because of the confusion of that language, which they readily understood before. But the Hebrews mean by the word Babel, confusion. So there's a couple things here. Artistically speaking, when I chose to do the tower, through the whole Tower of Babel part of the chapter, you only get to see the outside of it once or twice. Like I built the thing like Bill Sienkiewicz did the Demon Bear in the early New Mutants books, where he drew this demon bear like it was like part of the environment. So I always did the shots of the tower like from like an interior, and then when you do get to see it, basically it takes up the whole like of a, not a splash page, but of the whole of like one page that you're looking at. It's actually I think it's actually pretty cool. Maybe I'll post some pictures of it up on Instagram or throw them in the Abercast Facebook page for everybody. Give you a reason to go there, because I always don't put anything in there. Josephus wrote. I already told you what Josephus wrote. Per Genesis 10, Nimrod was the son of Cush. There is a lot going on here. The founding of Babylon, the division of humankind. And it was noted that Nimrod was a great hunter. We're going to do a little bit of a deep dive here on Nimrod for a second. I'm sorry, that was an early break, but I had to lubricate. So we're going to do a bit of a deep dive here, and we're going to get into a little bit of context about Nimrod. Generally, I'm like, well, what makes this guy so special? I mean, he's the son of a cursed man, and he winds up being like the main dude. He winds up being like he's like the center of the one world government on the planet at this time. So like, what makes this guy so special? And there's a Jewish legend. Ginsberg spent a lot of time collecting these oral traditions of the Jews, and he published a series of books called Legends of the Jews. So there's tons of just fun mythology stuff in there, all relating to basically the Old Testament. So there's this Jewish tradition about when Adam and Eve were booted from the Garden of Eden. God made these special like long johns for them. He made like these magical long johns for them. Out of, it just says skins. We have no idea what it is. I show these. I don't explicitly make reference to them, but my main character is wearing like these funny like stitched together like long johns in the later like in the third chapter of the book, and that's what they are. I never really come out and say like, hey, I'm wearing Adam's underpants, but so Adam passes the garments on to Cain and Abel's brother Seth, their younger brother, who passes them down to Enoch, who passes them down to Methuselah, who gave the magic underpants to Noah. And that's when Ham stole them. Ham, the cursed, stole them from his dad, and eventually passed them to his son Nimrod when he was like 20 years old. A lot of this stuff, some of this stuff also comes from the book of Jasher, which is not in most Bibles, but it's referenced like in 3 of the books. They're like just like the book of Jasher. So it's like something that some people in the Bible thought was part of the Bible and some people didn't. This was all before the Council of Nicaea, where they sat down and figured out what was supposed to be in the Bible and what wasn't. So, you know, when you ask like what was so awesome about Nimrod, a large part of it seems to be these magic underpants that God made Adam, that's been passed down over generations to generations, and it made him a strong of hand, and it made him a great hunter. But there's also this, in let's see here. I'm conferring my Ryrie expanded edition, new international version, red letter Bible. Check it in your Bible. In Genesis 10, it's something called the Table of Nations, and it says, "This is the account of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, Noah's sons, who themselves had sons after the flood. The sons of Japheth, Gomer." Oh, I should take a second to say R.I.P. to Jim Neighbors. He just passed away this week. The sons of Japheth, Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshach, and Tyras. And the sons of Gomer, Ashkenza, Riphath, and Togmar, the sons of Javan. Elishash, Tarhash, the Kittim. Why does this is not a name? This is a title. The Kittim and the Rodnim. From these, the maritime peoples spread into their territories and their clans within their nations, each with its own language. The son of Ham. The sons of Ham, Cush and Marazam, Put and Canaan. The sons of Cush, Seba, Hevelah, Sabata, Ramaha, Sabteka, and the sons of Ramaha. The sons of Ramaha, Sheba and Dedan. 10:8. Cush was the father of Nimrod. I could have just skipped to this part. I'm sorry for making you listen to me butcher all of this. Okay, so Genesis 10:8. Cush was the father of Nimrod, who grew to be a mighty warrior on earth. And he was a mighty hunter before the Lord. That is why he said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. And the first centers of his kingdom were Babylon. All right, so he's saying Nimrod was a mighty warrior. He's a mighty warrior, and so if you look at I am not a Hebrew scholar. I don't know Greek or ancient Hebrew, but if you apparently, let me put this back on the bookshelf real quick. Okay, so, but if apparently you know that stuff, you look at the actual word as Gabor or Gaborum, which in some cases seems like it means a giant. In some cases, it mean they call it like a mighty warrior or whatever. It seems to me like if they're good guys, they're just mighty warriors. But if they're bad guys, they're giants. That's what it seems to me. So Rob Skiba, which I mentioned earlier in this episode, breaks down all these translations, and he asserts that in this Tower of Babel, Nimrod does something sexual or something biological that transforms Nimrod into a giant, or starts transforming Nimrod into a giant. I think this is fascinating. I actually didn't take it as far as him turning into a giant in my book, The Ages. But in my book, I do touch on this idea that he is experimenting. He's actually has, I don't know how much of this I should give away. He has the immortal. Okay, so Cain gets cursed to walk the earth forever. And what it means by that is he gets cursed to walk the earth forever. So Nimrod actually catches Cain, and he's harvesting his blood and his bodily fluids to use to extend his life or become immortal as well. So I didn't go as far as this Skiba character does to say he's turning himself into a giant, but he is doing some unnatural stuff with bodily fluids from the cursed Cain. The idea is that he's trying to alter himself, and this is part of the sin that is this Tower of Babel. So I got another read here. Hold on. I just need hold on. Okay, so we're going to jump over to the book of Jasher, chapter 9. And this is the one that I was talking about that's not part of most Bibles. Check it in your Bible. But the Bible does point at the book of Jasher and says, hey, remember this book of Jasher when this happened? There's like 3 or 4 like famous like bits of it. I don't know what they are offhand. I didn't fucking write them down. So here we go. The book of Jasher, chapter 9, verse 20. That's where we're going to pick it up at. And the king Nimrod reigned securely, and all the earth was under his control. And all the earth was of one tongue and words of union. And all the princes of Nimrod and his great men took counsel together. Phut, Mitzrayim, Cush, and Canaan with their families, and they said to each other, come, let us build ourselves a city, and in it a strong tower, and its top reaching to heaven, and we will make ourselves famed, so that we may reign upon the world again. Reign upon the world. I got slipped into like a evil supervillain mode. That we may reign upon the whole world, in order that the evil of our enemies may cease from us, and that we may reign mightily over them, and that we may not become scattered over the earth on the account of their wars. See, that's what I'm saying. They felt like they were being attacked because they were attacked by like rapist angel invasions and crazy Nephilims and genocidal divine floods. And they went to being they all went before the king, and they told the king these words, and the king agreed with them in this affair, and he did so. And all the families assembled, consisting of about 600,000 men, and they went to seek an extensive piece of ground to build the city and the tower. And they sought in the whole earth, that they found none, like one valley in the east of the land of Shinar, about 2 days' walk. And they journeyed there, and they dwelt there. And they began to make bricks and burn fires to build the city and the tower, and they that they imagined to complete. And the building of the tower was unto them a transgression and a sin, and they began to build it. And whilst they were building against the Lord God of heaven, they imagined in their hearts to war against him, and to ascend into heaven. And all these people and all the families divided themselves into 3 parts. The first said, we will ascend unto heaven and fight against him. The second said, we will ascend into heaven and place our own gods there and serve them. And the third part said, we will ascend into heaven and smite him with bows and spears. And God knew all of their works and all of their evil thoughts. And he saw the city and the tower which were being built. And when they were building, they built themselves a great city and a very high and strong tower. And on account of its height, the mortar and the bricks did not reach the builders in their ascent to it, until those who went up had completed a full year. And after that they reached to the builders and gave them the mortars and the bricks. Thus was it done daily. What this is saying, I just now realize this, what this is saying is that it took a year for these workers to climb up the fucking tower. It just reminds me of Heinz Field. It reminds me of Three River Stadium, walking up those fucking, all these ramps to get up to the top, and you gotta stop at the fucking Aramark stand every other one to get some fucking french fries or something. I mean, these guys would have had to do that. And behold, back to Jasher. We're on verse 28. And behold, these ascend and other descend the whole day. And if a brick shall fall from their hands and get broken, they would all weep over it. And if a man felled and died, none of them would look at him. What they're saying is, if a brick got fucked up, they were all just like, fuck, man, that's just one brick. But if a dude got hit or died or fell, they would just be like, yep, whatever, we have 600,000 motherfuckers. Back to the Jasher chapter 9. And the Lord knew their thoughts, and it came to pass, when they were building, they cast the arrows towards the heavens, and all the arrows fell upon them, filled with blood. And when they saw them, they said to each other, surely we have slain all those that are in heaven. For this was from the Lord, in order to cause them to err, and cause them to err, and in order to destroy them from off the face of the ground. And they built the tower in the city, and they did this thing daily until many days and years were elapsed. So he's saying that they shot the arrows up into the heavens, and God would trick them and make blood on them when the arrows landed. So they were like, like if we just get a little bit closer, we could kill all these bitches. And God said unto the 70 angels who stood foremost before him, because you have to understand in these cases, like the way that these guys saw God in his throne room or whatever, is that he was like in the middle, and like all the angels were circular in order of importance around him. The most important ones were closest to him, and it went out further and further, and all these angels did all day long was sit around and praise God. And the outermost group of angels just circled his throne, just singing, holy, 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 all for eternity. That's how crazy this God is, y'all. He just creates these half-sentient beings to float around him singing about how awesome he is for eternity. That shit is lunatic level crazy. Oh, Yabble Boath, you, as I'm shaking my hand at the sky. And God said unto the 70 angels who stood before him most, to those who were near to him, saying, come, let us descend and confuse their tongues, that one man shall not understand the language of his neighbor. And they did so unto them. So I want to just stop real quick, and I need to go back and find something that I read earlier. Oh, this is actually from, like, the legit Bible. This isn't even from Jasher. This is right from Genesis. I think it's 10, maybe 9. I don't remember. It's the Tower of Babel chapter. He says, the Lord said, behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And this they bane to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Now, just think of that statement. And now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Like, that, does that sound like a scared, frightened person to you? Like, hey, we got to stop this because they can fucking do whatever they want. Phew, man, that's something to think about, isn't it? That's some crazy shit. All right, back to Jasher 9:33. And from that day following, they forgot each man his neighbor's tongue, and they could not understand to speak in one tongue. And when the builder took from the hands of the neighbor lime or stone, which he did not order, the builder would cast it away and throw it upon his neighbor, that he would die. And they did so many days, and they killed many of them in this manner. And the Lord smote the 3 divisions that were there, and he punished them accordingly to their works and designs. Those who said, "We will ascend to heaven and serve our gods," became like apes and elephants, and those who said, "We will smite the heaven with arrows," the Lord killed them, one man through the hand of his neighbor. In the third division of those who said, "We will ascend to heaven and fight against them," the Lord scattered them throughout the earth. And those who were left amongst them, when they knew and understood the evil which was coming upon them, they forsook the building, and they also became scattered upon the face of the whole earth. And they ceased building the city and the tower, therefore, and called the place Babel, for there the Lord confounded the language and the whole earth. Behold, it was the east of the land of Shinar. And as to the tower which the sons of men built, the earth opened its mouth and swallowed up 1/3 part thereof. And fire also descended from the heavens and burned another third. And the other third was left to this day. And it is part of that which is aloft, and the circumference is 3 days' walk. And many of the sons of men died in that tower, a people without number. So, in my book, where are we at? Okay, so, where are we at? Okay, so in my book, it is hinted that since God failed to kill mankind with the deluge, he divided their language and to turn them upon each other. Mankind will eventually kill themselves with great wars, like the War of the Nine Kings or the Battle of Siddim, which is in Genesis 14, which we'll get a little bit into, which is also featured in The Ages. So what happens to this group of humans when they scatter and group along their linguistic lines? What happens to the tower? This story in Genesis doesn't say. Jubilees 10 says that God knocks it over with a great wind. The Jewish Midrash says that the top of the tower is burned, like the tarot card, the tower, and the desert swallows the base of it up. To the middle is left to erode over time. That's kind of also what Jasher there says. So what happened to this Nimrod character himself? He's defeated and humiliated, and he finds a quiet home and raises some goats to fuck for a living, right? Wrong. All right, so I asked what happened to Nimrod. He actually changes his name and becomes becomes the ruler of Babylon. He solidifies a power block with a few other kings with his armies, and he subjugates and taxes the cities and kings of the plains. You're like, what? Yeah. This comes from the Jewish Encyclopedia. It was published in 1906. Amraphel, a king of Shinar, who invaded the west in conjunction with, here we go, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and others, and destroyed Sodom. The identity of the name has long been subject of controversy among Assyrianologists, and is not even yet established to the satisfaction of all scholars. Schrader was the first to suggest that Amraphel was Hammurabi, king of Babylon, the sixth king in the first dynasty of Babylon. This is now the prevailing view among both Assyriologists and Old Testament scholars. The transformation of the name Hammurabi into the Hebrew form Amraphel is difficult of explanation. So Hammurabi is the founder of the centralized kingdom of Babylonia and the capital at the city of Babylon. The length of his reign is given in the native list of kings as 55 years. But this long period is not perfectly certain. As a result, Discovered Chronicle throws doubt upon some of the figures of the king's list from which the number 55 is obtained. and puts the length of his reign at 43 years. The period at which Hammurabi reigned is also subject to much dispute. So Hammurabi began to reign Babylon when the Amalekites were in possession of the kingdom of Sumer and Akkad. And they were driven out, and the whole country was united under his rule. The dominion thus set up was strengthened by the great works of peace, the chief of which were the digging of the canal at Babylon and the erection of the great granary there, the building of the temples of Lasar and Scypia, and the construction of the walls of the latter city, like a, quote, like a great mountain, unquote. So that's all interesting. You're like, why are you telling me about this Abalon guy or this Amraphel guy? So in rabbinical literature, according to Rab and Samael, Amraphel is identical with Nimrod. Some say that Amraphel was his real name, and he was called Nimrod, which translates to the chief rebel, as leader of the tower builders, who led the world into rebellion against heaven's rulers. Hold on a minute, I'm suffering. Where's that at? Others say Nimrod was his real name, and he was called Amraphel as the one who commanded them to cast Abraham into the fire. Among other fanciful etymologies of the name is explained as that one of those commands brought darkness, destruction on the world, or of one who provoked and made sport of the world. So this rabbinical literature links Nimrod with Amraphel, and then this above thing, which is both found in the Jewish Encyclopedia from 1906, lists Amraphel with this Hammurabi. Now, the interesting thing about this Hammurabi is that if you go to Washington, there's like statues and bas reliefs of him. He's listed as like one of the lawgivers that influenced the building of our Constitution. Like I believe, like in the Capitol, there's a bust of Hammurabi. So if you think this guy is like, if this linkage is like he's the great rebel, he's the guy who built the fucking Tower of Babel, he's the guy that fucking shot arrows into the sky to kill God, and now he's here. Oh, that's fucking bananas. It's crazy. I love it. So what I'm saying is he actually changes his name, becomes ruler of Babylon. He solidifies a power block with a few other kings and armies, and subjugates and taxes the cities and kings of the plains until what I like to call World War Z breaks out. But the story of the Battle of the Nine Kings is a story for another time, so you guys are going to have to wait for that. We're going to wrap this up right after this. So, before we wrap up the show, we're gonna wrap up the show, by the way, with remember our friends fighting giants from the Giant of Kandahar episode. We're gonna go back and listen to a song from them. So hang tight. I want to remind you guys, or ask you guys, or encourage you guys, or just be like, please, will you fucking support the show? You rate and review. I'm sorry, man. I'm all scratchy. I guess my throat is worse shaped than it was. It's only been like an hour, but there was a lot of reading. Okay, so rate and review the show on iTunes. It's getting lonely out there. And it's getting late in the day. So I need some help. Please rate and review the show. Spread the disease. Tell your buddies about the show. Or contact me. I gave my email address, towers at towers113@gmail.com. That's my personal email address. It's not for the show, but contact me if you're a musician, if you have some, or someone that you know is a musician, you have some music you'd like me to play on this decompression part of the show, which I'm freaking out trying to get to, or you could pick up some books. You heard a lot of like commercials and ads for a lot of great books, and the book things help me out a lot because it helps me pay for stuff. It also helps me justify spending all the time doing research and doing the notes and doing all this reading and stuff when I should be inking some fucking books. So help me out there. StigmataStudios.com to find out everything that's going on. I also mentioned the Abercast Facebook page, so maybe I'll throw some Tower of Babel stuff up there this week. Always remember Society 13. If I got you through this hour of your work day or your workout or your work whatever, and you're like, what the fuck am I going to listen to next? Check out society-13.com. We got a lot of great podcasts on there. I suggest the Queens of NC-17. If you like smart, witty females talking dirty about horror movies, that shit is the best. I discovered them. You're welcome. Also, just another reminder, a call out to bands. If you're in a band, you want to showcase your music in the decompression portion of the Abercast episodes, I'm opening the gate. I'm opening the floodgates, everybody. Please, welcome to do that. Thank you guys. We're working up to the holiday season, and I still haven't figured out how I'm going to do this Books for Soldiers thing. So, hey, in all case scenario, if it sounds good to you, you can check out Operation Paperback, or I think it's Books for Soldiers or whatever, and like maybe you can just do it by yourselves. I don't know. And this is We All Look the Same by our friends Fighting Giants. It's a nice, calm way to end the episode, and I hope you stay and listen to it. Thank you, and I love you all.